To find the answers, what I think is needed is an understanding of what you might call the mechanics or the methodologies of demonization. Now, when we think of the demonization of a people, we tend to think of it as a process of whipping up hatred, spreading lies, trafficking in conspiracy theories, indulging in invidious stereotypes, and so on. And this is a well-established pattern that covers Nazi Germany's treatment of the Jews, Maoist China's treatment of its own so-called intellectuals, and of course what happened in Rwanda in the early 1990s. But there is another, more crucial aspect to that methodology, which is fostering a broader culture of indifference and ultimately acceptance of that demonization as being somehow inevitable or normal or even, to some extent, justifiable. You're probably all familiar with a famous line usually attributed to Edmund Burke, that all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. So how do you get good men to do nothing? More to the point, how does Iran get good men and good women to do nothing? Now, a powerful answer, I think, was offered with a very different set of issues in mind by Daniel Patrick Moynihan in his famous 1993 essay, Defining Deviance Down. The late US Senator was trying to understand how it was that Americans had come to accept as a given stratospheric levels of social deviancy that would have shocked people a generation earlier. His short answer was that, and I quote, "Over the past generation, the amount of deviant behavior in American society has increased beyond the levels the community can, quote, afford to recognize, and that accordingly, we have been redefining deviancy so as to exempt much conduct previously stigmatized and also quietly raising the normal level." I'm sure that most of you will immediately recognize that something similar has been going on with respect to our attitudes about Iran. Back in the 1990s, the West breathed a collective sigh of relief when a supposed moderate, Mohammad Khatami, was elected president after the tenure of Hashemi Rafsanjani, who was then seen, and indeed is, an ultra-hardliner. But after Ahmedinajad was elected in 2005, one increasingly saw references to Rafsanjani as a principled pragmatist. And last July, following the Iranian election, the Reuters news agency, our favorite news agency, actually described Rafsanjani as a, quote, moderate. Now, Rafsanjani is not a man who has, to my knowledge, moderated his ideological positions in any way. He is wanted by Interpol and by the Argentine government for his role in ordering the 1994 bombing of the Jewish Cultural Center in Buenos Aires, in which 85 people were murdered and hundreds more injured. About Adolf Hitler, he has said that, quote, "Europe resolved a great problem, the problem of the Zionist danger." That is to say, it resolved it, or Hitler resolved it by killing 6 million Jews. He has also said, and again I quote, that the use of even one nuclear bomb inside Israel will destroy everything. However, it will only harm the Islamic world. It is not irrational to contemplate such an eventuality. By what measure, then, can Rafsanjani be described as a moderate? How does Iranian deviancy get defined down? The answer is that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad defines it down. He does so by calling Israel to be wiped off the map, not once, but dozens of times. He does it not just by hinting elliptically at his Holocaust denial, but by hosting a conference of deniers in Tehran. He does so not just by stealing an election, but by stealing it brazenly, and then putting his political opponents and even a few foreign citizens in front of kangaroo courts. He does so not just by practicing repressive policies at home, but by flaunting his illiberalism before an audience of students at Columbia University. He does so not just by upping the nuclear ante, but by upping it again every time the West proposes to come to terms. This is a deliberate strategy. On the nuclear front, for instance, Ahmadinejad all but admitted as much late last year when he observed of the West how, quote, "A few years ago, they said we had to completely stop all nuclear activities. Now look where we are today." It is a common mistake, I believe, to suppose that the essence of tyranny lies in force or terror. Those are merely the methods. The real essence of the tyrant's art is his connoisseurship of human frailty, weakness, and a capacity for self-deception. And that applies not just to those who live directly under the tyrant's thumb, but also to those outside of his orbit, whom he seeks to manipulate, intimidate, and deceive. In fact, you might even go so far as to say that nobody understands the democratic mind quite as well as a clever despot. That helps to explain the extraordinary success of Hitler's diplomatic gambits in Europe in the 1930s, when he presented himself not as a lunatic messianist bent on world domination, but as the justifiably aggrieved leader of a nation hard done by the terms of Versailles. It explains the achievements of Soviet propaganda in covering up its 70-year crime spree while winning over legions of accomplices, fellow travelers, and useful idiots. And it explains also why Ahmedinajad and the Ayatollah Khamenei now hold the stronger cards in their confrontation with the West.